Welcome to Audiobook 365 Stories.
At 4 o'clock in Gdynia station, 13 miles from Wresz, rain was pouring down heavily. But of the two people waiting for the train, only one was under the shelter. When the other absent-mindedly stepped under the glass, the first person left their seat to avoid the rain. They stayed outside, facing the wind and rain, looking at the silver and gold line on the horizon under the dark clouds, and the amber glow spreading through the clouds. Mademoiselle Helene Marie Denise Bonin-Watlot, the signalman's eldest daughter, who Farquhar had become friends with on his trips to Brussels, came over and talked to him about the forks she had washed and the garters she was wearing. But today, Farquhar didn't get any chocolates from her big pocket in her coat. When the train arrived, the two rivals got into different carriages as far from each other as possible. They were both relieved to be moving, even though the train stopped at every station. It felt like the train was moving very slowly. 5 o'clock came, and they reached Hoyet, where they changed trains and had their second encounter. The platform was crowded, and Farquhar, trying to find a seat, ended up face to face with Lucien. He quickly moved away, causing the Belgian ladies nearby to laugh. Lucien found it amusing that Farquhar chose to sit with 3 babies and a nurse instead of sitting with him. Farquhar had a fun journey. He stood the whole way to Dinant and enjoyed the babies crying in the tunnels. At 6 o'clock, they reached Dinant for their third change, and now they had to wait for 30 minutes. The rain had stopped, and the sunlight was shining brightly. Farquhar tried to draw the scene on the back of Dolly's letter while waiting. As they traveled through the beautiful rocky valley of the Meuse River, Farquhar kept checking the time because their train was late. There was a chance they might miss their connection at Namur. If they missed it, they couldn't cross that night and would have to wait another whole day before hearing from Dolly. At 7 o'clock, they passed Yvoire, and the sky was clear. The Meuse River looked beautiful in the sunset's glow. At 7:30, they arrived at Namur station, 10 minutes late, and the Brussels Express was due. Farquhar quickly got off the train and ran towards the main line, followed by Lucien. Despite some obstacles, Lucien managed to get on the train with the help of a stranger. He was exhausted and collapsed in his seat, while the stranger gave him some brandy to drink. It took Lucien several minutes before he could even muster the curiosity to look at his rescuer. Once Lucien's heart calmed down and his vision cleared, he saw that the person with him was a slim, fair-haired young Englishman in a gray outfit who was looking at him kindly with dark gray eyes. Lucien smiled back and saluted him because he couldn't speak yet. "You almost missed the train," said the stranger. Lucien nodded. "I hope I didn't rip your coat." Lucien checked and found a long tear, but he smiled anyway. "No, it's okay, thanks. I really appreciate your help. I was determined to catch this train. There would have been trouble if I'd missed it."
I'm glad.
"Are you crossing tonight?" "Yes, I'm going back," said the stranger, taking out a newspaper from his bag. Lucien guessed it would be the Spectator and moved a coin from one pocket to the other when he saw it. Then came the Engineer Journal.
Ah,
Lucien thought to himself, "So you're a soldier, huh? That's why you look so sharp." He said aloud, "I kind of think you saved my life, you know, by pulling you in." "Surely not." "No, not like that. By giving me ODV. You shouldn't run if you have heart problems," said the stranger. starting to read The Spectator. 13 different doctors have told me the same thing, Lucian admitted. But it's one of those things I can't seem to remember. I understand. It must be hard, the stranger agreed, focusing on the newspaper. Lucian didn't feel like talking more in front of the serious newspaper, even though he didn't like his own thoughts. He studied the stranger's delicate and somewhat feminine face and long eyelashes, trying to guess his personality from them and his position and future from his clothes. The more he looked, the more he felt like he should know him. "Where have I seen your face before? It seems so familiar to me," whistled Lucian softly to himself, trying to remember, like solving one of those tricky puzzles from Sunday school. Bright sunlight, a wooden door frame, and someone standing beside him. These fragments popped into his head, but he couldn't put them together. His feverish mind had calmed down. Lucian wasn't naturally excitable. It was Farquhar's stormy personality that threw him off. Even in his wildest moments, he never let one feeling take over completely, unlike Farquhar. So now, while he worried about Dolly, he also spun a dramatic story about the quiet young man from The Spectator. By the time they reached Brussels, Lucian had imagined him as a bigamist or even a trigamist, unsure if he had poisoned his first wife or his mother. 9, 10, half past. Darkness had fallen, stars twinkling in the sky, and the wind blew steadily from the southwest, reminding Lucian of the strong trade winds. Brussels was far behind, Ghent was past, and they rushed through Bruges with 3 loud screeches. The train smelled stuffy and rocked noisily, as only a Belgian train can. They raced over the flat lands, the rhythmic throb of the train echoing like a galloping horse. No tunnels here. They passed canals with a rush and a roar, their golden windows reflecting in the still water. Lucian leaned out, feeling the grit from the engine and smelling the sea. In the west, the sky glowed over Ostend. He imagined the aristocratic stranger locked up in a dark prison, facing the gallows, as he turned from his fantasies to face reality. He remembered the despair he felt gambling with Marianne while his wife lay dead upstairs. He had known failure in every aspect of life. Dolly wasn't for him. He had known it, but refused to believe it until now, reaching the lowest point of his troubles before accepting the truth. "We'll have a rough crossing," said the stranger, folding his newspaper. "Are you a good sailor?" "Not at all, are you?" "Couldn't be worse," said the stranger, laughing. "Are you going below?" "No. I'll stay on deck and endure my misery until the end of the journey. Sick transit, as they say, and it's always sickening. You'll get soaked if you stay on deck tonight. Why not try a private cabin? They're comfortable." "To be honest," said Lucian, leaning back and stretching his muddy boots, "I'm completely broke. I only have enough for my fare from Dover." "I understand." The stranger stood up to get his bag and put on his coat, moving gracefully like a cat. After a moment, he turned to Lucian and said hesitantly, "I'll have a deck cabin for myself. Would you like to share it?" "I'll be terribly sick," said Lucian, surprised. "So will I." "Well, if you're okay with it, you might find me comforting. I'll be a mess. Are you sure you want me?" "If I didn't, I wouldn't have asked," replied the stranger firmly. "That's really kind of you." "Then it's settled. Thank you very much." So Lucian and Lal crossed the channel together in one cabin, both very ill, especially Lal, who suffered without complaining. He couldn't even give himself credit for his unselfishness because his conscience was too high-minded to praise him for sacrificing his dignity. He also thought he had been foolish to make friends with a stranger. The sight of Lucian coughing and the sight of other passengers dripping wet at Dover made him feel better, as it allowed him to justify his impulsive behavior as an act of common humanity. Among those dripping passengers, Farquhar was the wettest and least pitiable. For the past 4 hours, he had been leaning over the bow of the ship, trying to figure out how to get a special train to Dover. He cursed and swore, but he eventually found out that the quickest way to reach Monkswell was to go past it on the express train to London and then come back on a slower one. He was confident that he would still be the first to see Dolly at Fane's, though how he would manage that was his secret. However, they didn't arrive at Monkswell together. Lucian's friend decided to follow Farquhar's plan and took the express train. Lucian said goodbye and stayed in Dover. During a previous trip in the spring, Lucian had become friends with a porter who worked at the station. Lucian found the porter and convinced him to help him. There was no slow train for a few hours, but there was a goods train leaving immediately after the express. Lucian and the porter spoke to the driver of the goods train, and after it left, Lucian disappeared from Dover Priory. It wasn't allowed, but rules can be broken. Lucian was dropped off at Faversham Junction at 3 in the morning and waited for a slow train to Monkswell from the Kent coastline. First to arrive at the station, Lucian got there at 10 minutes to 7 and started walking to Fane's, which was 2 miles away. He was extremely tired from the adventures of the previous day, the long journey, seasickness, a sleepless night, and anxious excitement. He hadn't eaten anything because he didn't feel like it in Dover and didn't have the chance in Monkswell. The familiar smell of the morning countryside surrounded him as he walked. 9 minutes after Lucian, the train from town arrived, carrying Noel Farquhar and Lal Lawrenson. They saw each other for the first time on the platform and greeted each other distantly. Lal left the station from the down platform and took a field path past the station master's pigsties and clothesline to the road. Farquhar crossed over to the main station buildings on the up platform and found his dog cart waiting in the yard with a very sleepy groom. This was his secret weapon. He had telegraphed Simpson from Gadin before they started, hoping to beat Lucian to Fane's. Now all 3 of them were on the final leg of their journey. Farquhar's dog cart raced down the hill and under the railway arch, its rubber tires making no noise. They passed the surgery, through the village, and into the country lanes, green tunnels sprinkled with sunlight. Simpson, the groom, sat behind, looking immaculate. Suddenly, the horse shied across the road, and Farquhar pulled him up sharply. He looked back to see Lucian sitting by the roadside. Lucian looked defeated yet defiant and amused, while Farquhar was angry and impatient. Farquhar tossed the reins to his groom and said, "Hold that," then jumped down and went to Lucian. "Come on, will you? Damn it." Lucian's expression changed. "Are you giving me a ride, buddy? Do you think I can leave you here?" "Okay, then. I'm exhausted." For the second time, Farquhar picked him up and put him in the dog cart, and they drove on together. Half a mile later, they reached the gates of Fane's. As the horse slowed to go up the hill, The groom jumped down to open the gates. But when he turned, he saw that they were already open, and Farquhar's carriage was disappearing down the slope. He ran after it for a bit, then decided to relax among the bushes and smoke his pipe. Farquhar drove silently down the smooth yellow driveway, passing snow-covered acacias, the stream, the lawn, and the rookery. As they turned the path and the house came into view, he stopped abruptly. In the fresh morning sunlight in front of the open door stood Dolly, wearing her blue dress, calling the pigeons to eat. They flew down to her, blue, fawn, and white, settling around her and on her. She scattered handfuls of grain that sparkled like gold. Her fair skin, chestnut hair, and blue dress were as bright and pure as the sunlight itself. A pigeon landed gently on her head, and she laughed as she shook it off, a carefree laugh and gesture that made Lucian blush. Then Farquhar's hand rested on his arm, and he noticed something he hadn't seen before, something Dolly, with her back turned, still hadn't noticed. A young man in a gray suit leaning a bicycle against the wall, which stubbornly refused to stand. He finally managed to balance it, approached quietly, and put his arm around her waist. Dolly turned to him, her face brightening as her basket slid down her arm and spilled its contents. "You!" she exclaimed. "Back already? I've wished 10 times an hour I hadn't sent you, lol." Lucian closed his eyes. Without a word, Farquhar grabbed the chestnut horse's reins and whipped him, sending him flying back up the driveway, scattering pebbles with every step.